Thank you very much. So yes, I am Amy Harrison. I am the owner of WriteWithInfluence, which is an online copywriting training platform. Today, I'm going to look at 4 mistakes, copy mistakes that kill conversions. But before I get on to the writing part of it, as marketers, there are a few challenges that we need to acknowledge and face before we even write a word of copy. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that our customers are not this person. Now, if you're not familiar with who this is George Mallory. George Mallory was an English mountaineer, and he took part in the first 3 British expeditions to Everest. One day, the New York Times wanted to do a profile piece on him and find out his motivation for wanting to climb a mountain. So they did an interview with George, and they said, "George, why? Why did you want to go and climb Everest?" And he paused before delivering his pithy and profound response, which was, "Because it's there." That was good enough reason for George to go and climb a mountain. And everyone applauded and said, "Oh, very witty, George, very witty." They went down as the most famous 3 words in mountaineering. Now, when I first learned about this story, I couldn't help but feel that there was probably someone a little less than impressed with George's reason for wanting to go climb a mountain, namely Ruth Mallory, his wife. In my head, the conversation, they're sitting out on their patio having a cup of tea. George turns to Ruth and says, "My darling Ruth, I'm going to go and climb Everest again." And she says, "What on earth for?" And so he hits her with it. "Because it's there." And he waits for her response, which as a wife, I think would probably be, "Are you absolutely kidding me, George?" Not what he was expecting. "We've got 3 kids, all under the ages of 10, and you've already been twice." Tell you what, George, if you want to do something just because it's there, fix the guttering. Do a spot of dusting. Or I tell you what, pick your clothes up off the floor because they are definitely there. In short, we are not expecting our customers to be George Mallory. They don't do things just because they're there, which is a real shame because it would make our lives so much easier if we could just create our products, put them out, people see them and they buy. But that's not good enough. We need to give them a good reason. But even then, even if you give people a good reason to do something, that's not always enough because people are really bad at following instructions. Even if there's a good reason behind those instructions, even if those instructions are there because they're essential to their safety. It's got to be one of the most commonly ignored safety signs around. It's very simple. When the light is on and you're on the plane, your seatbelt is locked and fastened. And yet every flight I take, as the plane comes down, taxis along the runway, what do you hear but the click, click, click of people undoing their seatbelts? It makes me furious because I'm very good at following instructions. I don't say anything, I just kind of stare passive-aggressively. And I imagine that if I was the pilot and I knew this was happening, I would be so tempted to just tap the brake, just a little, just enough to cause a few minor injuries. Because then you could go out and you could say, "Oh, I'm ever so sorry, and were you wearing your seatbelt?" No, that's why you wear your seatbelt. It's also why I'm not a pilot. People are really good at ignoring even the most explicit of instructions. And even when we think we have carved out a very clear path for people to follow, sometimes they just do their own thing. So we can't just tell our customers what we want them to do, which is to buy. We can't just give them instructions. We need to persuade. And copywriting is the language of persuasion. One of the reasons I get so passionate about copywriting is because I see the results that it can have and the effect it can have. Your customers are inundated with the same message from your competitors, the same benefits, the same things time and time again. They're inundated with advertising. But if you can tweak your message, it has the power to illuminate your offer. Copywriting also amplifies all of your marketing. Wherever you're using words, you can apply persuasive writing principles to get good results. A couple of examples of things that I worked on where we just tweaked a few things, we worked on the messaging that worked well. A simple postcard campaign. We changed the message and it created new business in just a few days. We'll look at that a little bit later. online client that I had had a video course that he wanted to launch, and so we decided to do a 2-week course campaign. And we really invested in making a message that stood out to our customers. We had no affiliates, very little advertising, and it worked so well. We ran this content campaign 3 different times. To date, that has made over $1 million of sales in new revenue to his business for a $400 business video course, just because we worked on the messaging and we thought about the copy. So why aren't more companies benefiting from the power of copywriting? Well, before we look at the 4 copy mistakes, sometimes you can start to have errors before you even start writing your copy. Traditionally, when we think about marketing, we often think in 2 camps. We've got our customer on one end that we're trying to reach, we've got our product on the other end, and our marketing copy is there to bring these 2 things together and to build a bridge. And one of the first rules of marketing is you have to know your customer. So one thing that I see companies often do is they build a persona or a copywriting profile. And this is a good idea because if you have a clear idea of who you want to reach, you're more likely to be able to write content and copy that connects with that person. Unfortunately, there's a lot of advice about building personas that means it doesn't actually help you when you start to come and write the copy. With a persona, you're encouraged to pick someone that represents your ideal customer and then to fill it with lots of rich details so they seem like a real person and you feel like you really, really know them. But this is what I see can happen. Companies start by picking a picture of someone that they think represents their ideal customer, sums up the demographics of the target market, and then they start to add detail. Let's get to know this person. Who is our customer? So to make it a bit more personal, they perhaps give her a name. This is Cassie customer. And then let's have a little bit more detail. Let's start to get to know her. So we write a bit of a backstory. She's 24, she works in retail, she's ambitious, college educated. And now we're starting to get a feel for this person, like we know her. But then we think, no, we need more detail. Let's pin this down even more. So we make this vision board, and we think, okay, what's her favorite food? Her favorite food is sushi. She likes going to the movies, and her favorite film is 50 Shades of Grey. She's a fan of opera and likes a glass of Pinot Noir. She has a dog named Bob, buys Apple products, and she drives a Volkswagen. And at the end of this industrious persona building exercise, we really feel like we know Cassie. And even Cassie herself is saying, it's like you can read my mind. Except that it's not. And I've worked with these decks, I've worked with companies that have given me these decks and said, go and write some copy, this is our persona. And what happens is you sit down, you have plenty of information, all these details, but when it comes to actually writing something, you don't know where to start. So why doesn't it work? Well, quite often with these types of personas, you're not getting the right details about your customer. If we take Cassie, we put her in front of a website that maybe sells mobile phones. Does it matter that she has a dog named Bob? As much as we might love Bob, we're not going to use that information in the copy. So a customer profile tip for copywriting, if you're not including information that you could literally pick up and put into your copy and have your ideal customer look at that and say, yes, that sounds like me, then you're just creating fiction. So how do you start getting the right details? Well, to bring these 2 sides together, it really relies on to start off with asking the right questions. What I see when people sit down to write copy is quite often they will say, well, why should my ideal customer buy my product? I think that's the wrong question to ask. And what I encourage clients to do is actually ask yourself, why would my ideal customer not buy my product? And what I mean by that is, why would someone who would love what you do, sees your marketing, sees your offer, and then doesn't buy? Because when you ask this question, it makes you more critical of your copy. It makes you more inquisitive. And you're more likely to start identifying weaknesses in your copy. And once you identify those weaknesses, you can then start to fix it. What I've found is that the reasons people don't buy fall broadly into 4 main categories. And the 4 big copywriting mistakes come from ignoring these categories, or, as I call them, 4 barriers to buying. These barriers are C, believe, desire, and trust. And that's what we're going to walk through today. Any one of these barriers can stop your perfect customer from buying your product. So how might they stop people from buying? First up is C. This sometimes confuses people because what do you mean they can't see my offer? I've sent it to them, I know they've visited it, they've seen the page, they've read the copy. What do you mean they can't see it? Well, sometimes we can actually write copy that makes our offer invisible. This was an email that I got from Gatwick Airport, and here we have this big offer that's telling me I can get premium security for just £1. Pretty impressive, but I don't know what premium security is. Now, if premium security is a kick in the shins when I get to Gatwick Airport, it's not worth it, even if it is just £1. So we've got this meaningless name, and then we've got this headline of flying this year. There's no urgency. I got this email in February. So just are you flying at some point, at some time? Well, maybe this offer is applicable. Looking into the email, the number of times premium security was mentioned was 3. The number of times it told me what it actually was 0. I had to click around and go and do some further work to actually find out what is on offer for £1. Now, I do see this happen a lot. Don't assume that the name you're giving to a particular product or service, it might have a lot of meaning to you, it might mean nothing to your customer. In which case, if they don't have that context, your offer can quickly become invisible. So this is what we have to try and catch our attention in a very short space of time. We've got this invisible name, and we've got the deadline which isn't mentioned. And there was a deadline to the offer. It was March 31st. So what is premium security? Very simply, it's a separate security line when you get to the airport so you can get through faster and you don't have to go through with everyone else. So why not include those details up front? They're important and integral to the offer. So instead, we could start off by saying, are you flying from Gatwick before March 31st? The deadline is important. That should be front and center. And then explain that people can receive a personal welcome when you get there. You can clear security faster on your own, away from everyone else, and you can get to the shops and the restaurants first. So don't underestimate how missing out a few details can make your offer invisible and make it more likely that people either, which my first instinct was to bin this email and then to bring it out and actually use it as an example, or click away or look for something else. The next barrier is believe. 2 common beliefs that can hold your customer back that I want to look at. The first one is they don't believe that there is a solution to their problem. So an example here that I like to use is imagine that, or maybe you don't have to imagine, but say your partner snores. Now, if your partner snores and you've been suffering with that for a few years, you may have tried lots of different things and found that nothing works. And you might just believe there is no solution to this. I've tried everything. And if you do a quick search, you can find that there are a lot of wacky and wonderful ideas to solve the problem of snoring. And if you're suffering this and you're looking for remedies and results, you may actually just end up thinking, I'm just going to have to do them in. That's it. That's the only way I'm going to solve this for good. Well, there's a company called Flare Audio, and they make earplugs, and they actually market them to people whose partner snores. But they acknowledge the fact that the first instinct for a lot of people are going to be, earplugs don't work. I've tried earplugs. Now, if there's a potential doubt like this for your customer, don't shy away from it. Tackle it head on. And they do this really, really well. One of the things that they do is that they understand that the doubt is valid. They don't just say, oh no, really, but ours do work. They go through a very simple narrative to explain, I understand why you have this doubt, but let me explain something new that you might not know. So what they do is they follow this and say, you may have tried these types of things before, and you've probably found that other solutions haven't worked. Well, there is a solution, and you might not believe it, but I can explain why it's true, and then I can show you what's possible. And the content that they use very simply to convey this is that, first of all, they start talking about what people may have used in the past, you know, foam, silicone, even cotton wool. So they're getting on the same page as their customer. And then they're acknowledging, what you've probably found by using this material is that they didn't work. They still let through some sound. And that's probably why you think earplugs don't work. Well, there's a different twist. If you use metal, metal is dense enough that it stops sound waves from penetrating. But I hear you, you might not believe this because metal's known as a good conductor. And so you wouldn't think that it would be a great solution for blocking out sound. However, and this is where they bring some of their expert insight as to why their product works, they say that metal needs to make a direct connection in order to transmit that sound. So if you insulate it and isolate the metal with foam, then you end up with the most effective earplugs ever made. This is their solution. So they don't just try and say, look, our earplugs are really, really good, here are all the benefits. They go straight for that frustration. Now, if all your competitors are talking about the benefits of their product, but you know that there's some doubt about the idea of there even being a solution, and you tackle it, it's a way to sound different, and it's a way to stand out very quickly. The other belief that can hold people back is that they don't believe it will work for them. We are very good for coming up with excuses about why we can't do something or why something wouldn't work for us, even if we know it's worked for other people. My parents are always at me to exercise. They would like me to exercise and be a lot more fitter than I am. And I have a friend, Becky, that does triathlons. And they will say, why don't you be like Becky? Becky does all these triathlons. Why don't you do triathlons? It's very easy for me to sit there grating cheese onto a kebab saying, sorry for Becky, she's got good genetics. Now, me, I would do triathlons if my blood type wasn't a mixture of Zinfandel and Cathedral City. You don't want these false beliefs to hold people back. Here's an example very quickly from FreshBooks, so small business accounting software designed for you. Whenever I see a headline like this, the question is, well, who is the you? Who is this targeted at? Because if it's targeted at someone who is, say, a small business owner who's very comfortable using software, very comfortable figuring out numbers, then this might be the perfect headline for them. But let's say that there is someone who could be your ideal customer, but maybe they're a little bit more creative, say a freelance artist. It's a big generalization, but let's say they don't like software, they don't like technology, they don't like numbers. Even if this product could get them results and help them with their accounts, they may have the false belief of, oh, I need to be good with numbers. I need to be good with technology in order to make this work. And if that's false, then this offer and this headline isn't going to connect with that potential ideal customer. So one thing that you want to do is explore whether these kind of doubts exist in your customers and combat that false belief of, oh, it probably won't work for me. And one way that you can do that is to tell them they don't need to be an expert or to have special skills or to be an athlete, be super disciplined, that it's easier to get results than they may think. So if we go back to this headline instead of this, we could use a testimonial that sums up some of those doubts. 20 minutes to do my accounts in a week, and I hate numbers. Thanks, FreshBooks. Very simple. We're not doing anything kind of crazy complicated other than tackling that doubt and coming at the copy from a slightly different angle. So don't be afraid of doubt, be willing to tackle it. Next is desire. Do they simply want it enough? If this is a barrier to someone buying, it's usually because in our copy we haven't articulated the transformation clearly enough. So here's an example. This is a mobile phone company based in Brussels, and they offer subscriptions to young people with lots of data in their packages. This is their subscription page. This is the copy that they're using to try and compel people to find out more about their subscriptions. So let's see how they're starting to try and compel and engage with their audience. Well, it starts off by saying this is a subscription with a state-of-the-art data offer. Is that what people really want? Well, let's go back to our young go-getters here. And she turns to him and she says, you know what, I really, really wish I had a state-of-the-art data offer. He's going to look at her and say, what? Who speaks like that? Because no one speaks like that. When we're talking about things we desire and we wish, we don't talk in language like this. And bless this fella, he's just over here wondering what on earth's going on. Fortunately, he's got a subscription with a state-of-the-art data offer, and he can just watch YouTube, while away the time, send photos to his mates. One of the things that I do with clients to get them out of this feature-led copy is to use what I call an impact table. And what we can do here is just walk through quickly how state-of-the-art data can actually lead to things that people really, really want. So it's simple 3 columns. We start off with a feature, state-of-the-art data, and then we ask ourselves, what do they want with that? And what can they do with that? Well, maybe they can watch videos faster, send and receive photos on the go, and use the phone as much as they want without going over their limits. So then we ask ourselves, so what's the impact from being able to do that? Well, maybe it means they can beat boredom on their commute, or they can feel connected to family and friends, or they just don't have to worry about their bill anymore and about, being charged for data, extra data that they've used. These 2 columns, if you go through this exercise and you fill this out for the features of your product, this is where you are going to come up with some really rich ideas that you can use as copy snippets that will work really well in short copy that articulates that transformation, that helps people visualize the benefits and the value of what it is that you have to offer. And there's 2 things that you need to bear in mind. This first column should be about what they can do. Not what they get, not what they have, but what they can do. You're looking for a verb. So here we've got watch, send, and use. And then this next column, you're looking for the emotional impact. How are they going to feel? And the emotional impact, you're looking at moving them towards a positive emotion or moving them away from a negative emotion, such as worry and concern. When you focus on these 2 columns as opposed to just the features that you offer, it helps people visualize having your product in their life, and it helps you articulate that transformation. Finally, we have trust, the 4th barrier. And again, one of the questions that I encourage my clients to ask is not why people hate you, but why people hate your industry. And this might seem a bit counterintuitive. Why would I want to criticize the industry that I work in? Well, if there are frustrations, if there are things that people don't like about your industry, if they then assume that all companies within that industry are the same, then they could dismiss you outright and not even consider your offer because they think they're going to get the same bad experience, same bad service, whatever it may be from you that they've had from someone else. But if you can acknowledge and identify those frustrations and show that you're different, you can really use it to your advantage. And this works well if you're trying to get someone to switch from a competitor to you. So, as I mentioned earlier, I did a postcard campaign for one of my clients, and they were a property management firm based in Phoenix, Arizona. They wanted to attract distant landlords. This is someone who owns a property in Phoenix but lives out of state, so they need someone to manage it. They had a postcard design, they weren't happy with it, so asked me if I would review it. And I had a little look, and first thing I noticed is that the headline isn't specific to my client, it's not specific to the problem. The headline's actually just 3 words that begin with the letter P, which sounds clever, doesn't actually say anything. And then if we flip it on the back, the content was the same content that everyone was talking about. All of the property management firms were talking about, expert management, great rates, saving money, rental income, et cetera, et cetera. So I went back to my client and I said, okay, they're already working with someone else. Tell me what they hate about them. And they said, well, property managers are notorious for being poor with communication. They may not get back to people very quickly, and as a landlord who's not near the property, that can make them feel very uncomfortable. They might receive a maintenance invoice, and they don't know if that maintenance is necessary because they're not able to go and inspect the property. And generally, they just don't know how the property is being looked after. This can make them feel very angry, very frustrated, and vulnerable. But they said, we can't talk about the competition, and we can't criticize the competition because that's illegal. You don't have to. You can absolutely position yourself as separate to the competition and address these frustrations without calling them out. So what we did is we redesigned the postcard slightly, and on the front, we simply were very direct about those frustrations and said, look, it's not easy when you're not near your rental property. You might be thinking you need fast communication. You want to know what's happening now, not in a few days' time. And you want to know if that maintenance invoice that you just received, if that's really necessary, because you're not there to check. And you don't want to worry about if your rent is getting paid on time or if it's even getting paid at all. And then on the back of the postcard, I simply explained how my clients were best positioned to be experts of solving these particular frustrations. This was to a cold list, it was direct mail, but they'd never heard of my client, they were out of state, and within 3 days they had their first conversion. And not a lead, they had someone ringing up saying, I am ready to move my business to you because this is exactly what it's like with my current manager. And they had $30,000 in new business in just a few days, and then they had this campaign that they could run again that was working very well for them. So you don't have to call out the competition, but definitely research, look for those frustrations within your industry and highlight them, and then show how you are different. Those are the 4 barriers. If you sit down to write copy with those 4 barriers in mind and ask yourself how they might be stopping your ideal customer from buying, you will start to write better copy. You will start to write copy that includes those important details that you need to communicate to people within the first few seconds of them seeing your advert or your offer. You will be able to tackle potential doubts that could otherwise have them dismiss your offer outright. And you can start by talking about the transformation, articulating the value of what your product will have in their life so that they can actually visualize it. And then you can position yourselves as someone that they can trust to deliver on that promise. When you consider these 4 barriers when you're writing your copy, what you'll find is that you don't have to rely on instructions that they are just going to ignore, because you can start writing copy that will make people see, believe, want, and buy. Thank you.